Hebrews again. We've got to talk about angels for a few weeks, so I thought we better have a little primer about angels because I need you to know where the people that the writer of Hebrews was talking to, where their brain was when they talked about angels, when they were discussing angels. How many wings do angels have? Seraphim have 6. And cherubim have 4. And the living creatures around the throne in the book of Revelation have 6.
Are they angels? They're creatures.
I don't know. Angels are, and this is why we're discussing this. Angels are spiritual beings. These are spiritual beings. The question is, what is an angel? Is an angel this, or are all spiritual beings that aren't God angels? What are angels? The angel of the Lord. How many wings did that angel have? Well, there's none discussed, so we'll assume 0. And all the other times you see angels, specifically in the Bible, there aren't any wings. So why do we think angels have wings? Because the seraphim and the cherubim have wings, and so we consider them angels. So angels have to have wings, but we don't want them to have 6, and we don't want them to have 4, because we can't explain how having more than 2 helps you. So all the pictures just have 2. That's the lowdown on the wings. As an example, that's a typical picture of an angel. I have this book at home. I went through a period where I spent a lot of time studying angels. This is Dictionary of Angels. Now, there are 386 pages in this book, which tells you how many angels there are according to the Dictionary of Angels. And it goes on, listing all these angels and the things that they are responsible for and what they do. And 99.75 of these angels don't occur anywhere close to the Bible. So why are you able to make a dictionary of angels with 386 pages and all of these angels listed out with all these things that they do? Because when we see a void, we fill it. Because there are places in the Bible where it talks about myriads of angels, thousands and thousands of angels. So we know they're out there. They got to have names and they got to do something. So we'll just fill in the blank. That's how we get the concept of angels that we have. The people of the time that the writer of Hebrews is writing to them were the same way. They believed lots of things about angels that didn't come out of the Bible. How many angels are actually named in the Bible? Now, if you look this up, there's a standard answer. So the standard answer in the Bible would be 2. Michael and Gabriel. There is a third angel that's named in not the official Bible, but in the Apocrypha, Raphael. So in the Apocrypha between the Testaments, in the old King James Bible and the Catholic Bible, you'll find Raphael. Interestingly enough, he's also called Saint Raphael because the Catholic Church canonized him. So he's an angel, but he's also a saint. And then, are there any other angels named in the Bible? Satan was an angel. I guess you could say Satan is an angel. And Lucifer is named, and he's equated with Satan because we find that convenient more than anything else. And Lucifer might not even be a name, it may just be a description because it literally means son of the morning. So, but there's another one. But there are some that are definitely named. One is Abaddon in the book of Revelation. He's literally called the angel of the bottomless pit. But we don't consider him an angel. Why? Because he's a demon. So we don't, even though the Bible says he's an angel, we don't call him an angel. We call him something else. What he is an angel. This gets to the heart of the matter to a certain extent, because when we think of angel, we think of the picture. The holy angel flying around, our guardians looking after us, all these things, not the angel over the bottomless pit. But what angels do, what angels are ministering spirits. They do what God tells them to do, and they have jobs. And being the angel of the bottomless pit is a job. And it makes you an angel, not something completely separate. When we read about him in the book of Revelation, he's still under God's control. God's telling him what to do, and he does it. But we can't think of him as an angel. We have to think of him as a demon, because he's guarding the bottomless pit. If he's down there in the bottomless pit, how could he be an angel? And that's because we have transformed that word into something that it's not really used for in the Bible. You're only an angel if you are on God's side. You're not an angel otherwise. Jesus talks about Beelzebub as the prince of demons. That would make him an angel, and Belial, Paul uses that as an example in 2 Corinthians. So even the demons technically are angels. So there are actually more than two, if you get technical about it. This question's probably a little easier. Who's better? Mankind, God, or angels? This is going to talk directly about where we left off last week. So yeah, that's an easy decision. Who comes second? That's typically how we do it. And we do that because there is a statement in Psalms that gets translated over in the Septuagint to the New Testament, which we will talk about when we get to chapter 2, that says man is a little lower than the angels. One of the excuses for Satan being upset is that he was afraid that man was going to move into second place. That's one of the traditional explanations about the enmity between Satan and mankind. Now, this statement is a statement Jesus makes, which has led to another misrepresentation. Jesus, when he's arguing with the Pharisees, says that when we, as human beings, rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. Man doesn't have a man and wife relationship after they're dead, is really what the point Jesus was making was. But this gets extended because it says that we are like angels in heaven. So for centuries, and still today even, when people die, what do they become? People believing that when you die, you do what? You get your wings. Because you're an angel. You're like an angel. So you get wings because angels have wings. So what we're doing here, what we did with this, is what people have always done. And even in the time that we're talking about, there was all of this mythology built up around angels. Last week we left it here, talking about specifically this last part. After making purifications for sin, Jesus sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. In that position that we looked at a minute ago, who's better? God, angels, and mankind. You could create a fourth position there, God, Jesus, angels, mankind, because that's what's being described here.
there after Jesus.
Well, but you can't do that
Why?
because in the 4th century, the church said you have to make a trinity that's all equal. And there is no position, and Jesus is not under God. Jesus is God. That's what you're describing is what the church declares subordinationism, and it's a heresy. Even though, quite logically, from the reading of the New Testament, you get the idea of subordination because if you just ask me, I think everybody in the New Testament believed in subordination. But then the 4th century comes along and you take all those little nuances that are in there and you have to put it all together and come up with a trinity where all 3 parts are equal. Why is the writer of the book of Hebrews arguing that Jesus had become better than angels? Well, if you think of Jesus as a man, then to get to the position he was put in at the right hand of God, he had to be elevated above angels because we're below angels. That's part of the argument. So a little bit more depth into that. Anybody recognize this person? He's killing a 3-headed dog. It's Hercules or Heracles, depending on whether you're Greek or Roman. What relationship did Hercules have to regular mankind?
Half God, demigod.
He was a demigod, and also because his father was Zeus, what was he? He was a son of God. So you see the relationship there. Jesus wasn't the only son of God in these people's minds. The people in the New Testament time had heard of sons of God before. So Jesus wasn't the original son of God in their brains. They'd heard of several people besides Hercules that were demigods, sons of Zeus, because Zeus liked to make sons with mortals. So in their mythology, they were used to this idea. So here's another guy. Anybody know who that is? It's a Caesar. It's the Caesar, Caesar Augustus, whose name was Octavian, but he became Caesar Augustus because he was the first one to be thought of in a particularly special way. So his father was Julius Caesar, and when Julius Caesar was assassinated, after that, the Senate declared him to be a god. That he was elevated after his death to the position of a god, one of their gods, which in turn made Octavian what? Son of God. So he was regularly called the Son of God. At the same time, Jesus was around. So this concept of Son of God was something that was a competing idea from the mythology and even from the politics. All I want you to see here is that these ideas were all there in their brains. Because we only think about it with one perspective. We got the Christian perspective, that's all we get. They had a soup. They had a vegetable soup full of stuff in their brains. Plus, the idea of Son of God could take on all sorts of connotations to them. And this is what we're converting from. Are angels basically the same idea as demigods? In their minds, Paul writes this in 2 Colossians: let no one disqualify, steal your prize. So let no one steal your prize, insisting on, and this word in this chapter gets translated asceticism, and everywhere else it's translated humility. But it's in a negative context here, so they change it. But literally it says insisting on humility and the worship of angels, going on in detail about visions puffed up without reason by his sensuous mind. So Paul is telling them, don't be like the others. Don't do the things that these other teachers are coming in and trying to tell you to do. And one of those things that they're telling you to do is worship angels. So, in essence, worship things that are between you and God. Angels could be seen as demigods, and angels could be worshiped. And in fact, that dictionary of angels that I showed you is full of names of angels for a purpose. These angels all got names and all got jobs for a reason. Because as you go through these early centuries and through the Middle Ages, Judaism specifically developed something called the Kabbalah, which is magic, and it uses angels that you call by name because when you have their name, they have to pay attention to you. And you can create all these magic formulas to use the angels to do things for you. Man's brain does this because he can't control these things in his world. He needs to find a way to control them. And that's what you see a lot with angels. There are actually ranks of angels, groups of angels named in the Bible, but we don't pay attention to them very much because it doesn't jump out in our brains as that's what it is. But here in 1st Enoch, which was before the New Testament, written before the New Testament, you'll see an example of that. And he will summon all the host of heaven and all the holy ones above and the host of God, which the host of God in the Old Testament and here represents the armies of God, which is made up of angels, and the cherubim, which is the cherubim, the seraphim, the ophanim, and all the angels of power, all the angels of principalities, and the elect one, and the other powers on the earth and over the water. So here's just angels of power, angels of principalities. You've read in the New Testament, Paul mentions this more than once, the principalities and powers. That was angels, groups of angels. So when Paul says, for I am sure that neither life nor death, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, rulers, powers, these are angels, groups of angels. There's this whole strata of angels that could do things that could intervene in your life and cause problems for you or help you. That's why he says that these things can't do anything to you. Here's another example. So that through the church, the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known to the rulers and authorities in heavenly places. Not the rulers and authorities on earth, but these groups. There's a group of rulers and there's a group of authorities. So you get these names, principalities, powers, rulers, authorities. All through the New Testament, we have examples of this several times. And it's talking about angels. And they're grouped up in these different ways. In the Old Testament, remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations, ask your father, and he will show you your elders, and they will tell you. What will they tell you? When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. So he told all the different kinds of people where to live, nations. So you got all the nations, and God defined where the nations are supposed to be. And when he did that according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. So God reserved Israel for himself. But that means he gave all the other nations to who? Well, here it says the sons of God. But who are the sons of God? When you get to the Septuagint, we find out these are angels, because the Septuagint translates this angels. The implication here is that every nation had an angel that was in charge of it. And this is the way they thought about it. Each nation had a god. That's kind of the way they thought about it too, because each nation worshiped something different. So this nation worshiped this god, this nation worshiped this god. Each Just like Israel had God, Yahweh, all the other nations had one too. But when you get to the Septuagint, this gets interpreted as angel. So each nation had an angel, so they were actually worshiping an angel, but the angel was in charge of them. And so we see other examples of this. Now, the other thing that the angels do that in the Old Testament, and this becomes important in the first chapter of Hebrews, that we don't really recognize, nobody ever talks about, is that they were the ones who gave the law. The angels were in charge of bringing the law to man. He said, "The Lord came from Sinai and dawned from Seir upon us," and this is Moses's final address to the people. "The Lord came from Sinai and dawned from Seir upon us. He shone forth from Mount Paran. He came from the 10,000s of holy ones with flaming fire at his right hand." And this became interpreted by the Jewish teachers as the angels bringing in the law. They were actually carrying the law down to man. They became the mediator of the law, because you yourself can't see God, you can't get in his presence. So he couldn't give you the law. Something else had to give you the law. Because if you went to God's presence, you didn't exist anymore. So it was actually the angels who became the intermediary. Thus the angel of the Lord. Because you couldn't actually talk to God himself, so you talked to God's angel, the angel of the Lord. This goes back again to that idea that I've talked about before with Philo. Philo had this notion that when God exposed himself to man, he became the Logos. There was this Logos of God that could communicate with man, because God the Father is unreachable. When they translated this into Greek in the Septuagint, they changed it to say, "On his right hand were his angels with him." So these were the angels that were doing this. So now let's look at it from the New Testament perspective. When Stephen was winding up his sermon that got him killed, he said this: "You stiff-necked people," talking about Israel, who received the law as delivered by angels and did not keep it." So again, by the time we get to the New Testament, in people's brains, the law was delivered by the angels. That was one of their responsibilities, was to be that intermediate between God and man. Angel means messenger. In the Old Testament, the word malach is the word for angel, and it means a messenger. Anybody could be a messenger, but if you were a spiritual messenger, then you were an angel, what we call an angel. In the New Testament, you get the Greek word angelos, which the word we get angel from, but it means the same thing. It's not an official term. Even in the New Testament, it simply means messenger. So you have to take the context and decide whether or not it's a spiritual being that is a messenger. Another example: "Why then the law?" Paul says. "It was added because of transgressions, until the offspring should come to whom the promise had been made, and it was put in place through angels, by an intermediary." So angels were playing that intermediary role between God and man, and angels were the deliverer of the law. So that's another thing that was in their brains then. So we got to here, and he describes Jesus as having become much superior to angels, as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. Next time when we pick this up, we're going to start going through that first chapter where Hebrews, the writer of the book of Hebrews, is proving how Jesus is better than the angels based on what's in the Old Testament. And so you got to know what he's better than. Now you know what he's better than, and now we'll prove why he's better than.